So is the picture now, well, acceptable?
Yeah, yeah, we can see it.
Okay, okay. So well, what happened here this summer? We kind of stumble upon this question, upon this problem. Vito, previously he was working, he did his PhD in philosophy of biology on the structure of explanation in biology. And he had, he drew a distinction between three kinds of mechanicistic or mechanical explanations in biology. Okay, and then the question was, okay, Vito, what are you doing? The meta-philosophical question was, what are you doing? What kind of activity that is distinguishing different kinds of mechanical explanations in biology? And then we had an email exchange, and many people said, oh, well, it's a conceptual analysis. So even if this is an relatively old-fashioned idea or something, maybe 4 or 5 people said, "Oh, it's conceptual analysis. It's obvious what is he doing." And then somehow I was not satisfied with that answer. I said, "No, no, no, it's not. No, it's not conceptual analysis. He was not analyzing concepts. He was proposing models or theories about the scientific explanation." So now we have here quite a long introduction. I don't know whether I should go through it or not. Vito, what do you think?
I think you can briefly, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah, just
okay, let's go. It is on the presentation, so I'll go, and then we will get to the point. Now the question is philosophy conceptual analysis? Actually, we will defend the view that there is conceptual analysis in philosophy, but that is not ultimately what philosophy is. That philosophy is building models and theories, And although there is a significant element of conceptual analysis, but what philosophy is just building theories or models primarily. Well, we can start with Leibniz. Well, he believed that in the mind of God, all truths are analytic, so that all predicates are contained in their subjects. So if Leibniz was right, then conceptual analysis is a universal method of any research of finding out any truth. Well, we have some drinks called monads. It's a new drink on the market here locally. This all truths are analytic. Then, of course, the question is how come that we have a feeling that some are synthetic? That is because we are not omniscient. And he has some explanation of how come that analytic truths are necessary, how to defend the free will. Then, for instance, in the concept of Caesar, it is contained, and it has always been contained, that he will cross Rubicon. Therefore, he cannot do otherwise. So how to defend free will? And Leibniz has some answer. It's not convincing, but okay. Many people believe that philosophy is conceptual analysis. For instance, Maurice Schlick, said that philosophy is queen of sciences, but not itself a science. Then he has this Wittgensteinian claim that philosophy is not a system of cognitions, but a system of acts. That philosophy is activity. but then he says this, by means of philosophy, statements are explained, by means of science, they are verified. The latter is concerned with the truth of statements, the former with what they actually mean. Okay, Schlick is slightly under the influence of Wittgenstein here. However, in air, AG, air, we have more clean statement. The philosopher, as an analyst, is not directly concerned with the physical properties of things. He's concerned only with the way in which we speak about them. In other words, the propositions of philosophy are not factual, but linguistic in character. That is, they do not describe the behavior of physical or even mental objects. They express definitions or formal consequences of definitions. Accordingly, we may say that philosophy is a department of logic. For we shall see that the characteristic mark of purely logical inquiry is that it is concerned with the formal consequences of our definitions and not with questions of empirical fact. So air is even more clear, clean, and understandable. So, okay, a bit later, some 30, 40 years later, or more, no, actually more, 60 years later, we have Strawson in his book Analysis and Metaphysics. What is the job of philosophy? Well, it's conceptual analysis. We have to analyze key concepts or important concepts like identity, knowledge, meaning, explanation, existence, and so on. Well, before we proceed, I can say that this picture, this idea that the philosophy, what is philosophy? Oh, it is conceptual analysis. It's actually quite catchy. It is a catchy claim and catchy statement or picture. It is a good meme. It is a good meme, for instance, for the students when you're explaining, okay, what are we doing? We are doing philosophy. What is philosophy? And there is a next building, there is physics and biology and so. And then we say, well, we are doing conceptual analysis here at the philosophy department. We are analyzing concepts. So we work with concepts. Guys in the other building, they work with facts. Guys at physics, biology, and so on, they work with facts. We work with concepts. So we are analyzing concepts, and philosophy is conceptual analysis. We are looking for definition of most important or central terms like justice, freedom, beauty, and so on. And students kind of remember that they don't care very much about it, but they remember it, they understand it. As I said, it seems to be a good meme. They are working with facts. We are working with concepts. Okay. So that is the picture, and as I said, it is a kind of a catchy picture. We can support this view with classical examples. Say that is what we do for 2,500 years. That is what Plato was doing in his Republic. He was analyzing the justice, that is the concept of justice, of just society, just state, or in his other dialogues. Every dialogue actually has a form of what is X, and then he's giving answer. X is blah blah blah. What is knowledge? What is courage? What is this? What is that? And plausible things to say about Plato's activity is that he was doing conceptual analysis. That in one dialogue he analyzed the concept of justice, in other dialogue he analyzed the concept of knowledge, and so on. And many episodes from the history of philosophy can be interpreted more or less plausibly. With some degree of plausibility, we can interpret history of philosophy that Spinoza was analyzing the concept of substance, that Descartes was analyzing the concepts of mental and physical, and so on and so on. So that philosophy is conceptual analysis.
Can I ask you a question about that historical picture? So I guess I'm just not clear how Plato or Socrates fits in all that well, given that so many of the dialogues ended in aporia. It's just kind of just like this. We tried conceptual analysis, it failed actually, and the lesson of the dialogue is this stuff is hard to pin down. It strikes me that in some ways a lesson we get from so many Socratic dialogues is philosophy couldn't possibly be conceptual analysis, because conceptual analysis leads us to doesn't get us a conclusive account. Like what is virtue, what is knowledge?
Oh, okay, yeah. There are problems. It does not. I don't know whether that eliminates the global picture. That what he was trying to do was conceptual analysis. Maybe it does. Well, he was not successful. It cannot be done. Something, but that is, well, the picture is that that's what Plato wanted to do. That was the methodology, that was the subject matter, and so on, looking for definitions. Now, whether he was successful or not, even if we believe, say, that concepts are primitive and that they, at least these important concepts, that they are primitive and that they cannot be defined, still we are doing kind of conceptual analysis. It's still conclusion from the conceptual analysis. Or we try to define the concept where we are not able to. Okay, I don't know. We are not smart enough or something. Still, we are doing conceptual analysis, but we cannot succeed in it. So that's
okay.
The comment. Any more? No comments. Okay, just drop in when you have something to say. Just now we're going to this interesting case of this Spanish grammar. So, Justin, do you know the case, this Spanish grammar of Strawson? No. Okay. So Strawson has very nice example, analogy. Spanish in medieval Spain, man made a first grammar of Spanish language, and he brought this grammar to what was a princess, I think, no, queen or princess Isabella. She was ruling Spain at that time, and he was very happy to show her, to present her what he has done. And her comment was, but why do we need that? We know we all speak Spanish anyway, so who needs that? Is there any good of this grammar? And then, okay, of course, the answer was, or at least was supposed to be, that he made explicit something that they all implicitly know by writing a grammar. In the same way, the idea is that philosophy makes explicit things or concepts that we all use. We all use cause, knowledge, knowledge, causation, justice, beauty, and so on, although we are not aware of the exact definitions and the consequences of these concepts. And that is what our philosophers doing. So it is a nice analogy or nice illustration of what are we doing. Okay, so grammar and philosophy. Grammar and philosophy, there is analogy. Okay, now strictly, it is a nice analogy. It is nice analogy, nice example, I like it. But strictly speaking, does it work? Does it work? Is writing a grammar conceptual analysis? I would say that it is not. So which concept is analyzed? There is no single concept or group of concepts that are analyzing in writing grammar. Say Croatian language has 7 folds and 7 tenses. Is this contained in any concept? No. So the idea of conceptual analysis is to take concepts and by contemplating concepts, squeezing out their content or necessary conditions or implications or something. So that Croatian language has 7 folds and 7 tenses. Where is that contained? In which concept is that contained? It is not contained in any concept. It is an interesting question whether writing a grammar is an a priori activity or a priori. That's an interesting question. I mean, guys probably sitting in his study, in his room and writing grammar, one who knows Spanish or Croatian or English or whatever, who has good command of language, can by, it may look like a priori activity. He's doing no measurements, experiments, and so on. But learning a language that comes from experience and language is ultimately an empirical fact. So we should warn about one thing. One is tempted to say that somebody who's writing a grammar is doing conceptual analysis because he's sitting in his armchair. He's not going outside of his room. So it is conceptual analysis. Well, no. We should not conflate conceptual analysis with a priori analysis. We'll see later, conceptual analysis is just analysis of concepts, what is and what is not contained in the concept. So it is not, it's not the case that any a priori analysis is conceptual analysis. So even if writing a grammar is a priori activity, it is still not a conceptual analysis because there's no single concept or group of concepts that are analyzed. Well, here is Bartol Kašić, 1604. He wrote the first grammar of Croatian language. At that time, they call it Illyrian language. Illyrike, lingua illyrica.
Sorry, Boran. But one might say that the point of the example is not that the grammar is identical to philosophy or the grammatical activity is identical to philosophical activity, but, well, that they both make explicit what is implicit.
Yes. Yes.
So, okay.
Okay, that is, analogy goes that far. I agree. But does it go further than that? I would say
no. No, I agree that it is not. No, okay.
So how far this analogy goes? Well, not completely. But yeah, what they do have in common is definitely that they make explicit what is implicit. They do that. So this Bartol Kašić, okay. Now, there are people who defend conceptual analysis today. Maybe the best known is Frank Jackson. And well, okay, he has a specific view that actually he believes that conceptual analysis is doing a lot of job. And he believes that we need conceptual analysis for reductionism in philosophy. For instance, for defense of physicalism in the philosophy of mind, that few crucial steps are done by conceptual analysis. Okay, so maybe we should not go into the details of his view, so-called Canberra program. Well, okay. Jackson is his book from metaphysics to ethics, a defense of conceptual analysis. 8. well, they're Chisholm and Ayer, they analyze knowledge through justified belief and so on and so on. There's method of possible cases, counterexamples, thought experiments, and so on. Okay, so or Jackson gives very simple picture. So what is conceptual analysis? What are we doing when we are doing conceptual analysis? We are trying to determine what is and what is not covered by some term in our language. So which objects do fall under the concept and which objects do not fall under the concept. In that case, we are doing conceptual analysis. Now we have, okay, pro means pro, those who are in favor of conceptual analysis. We have, let's say, the enemies, contra, who is contra, well, Williamson, Tim Williamson, he is, let's say, the archie enemy of conceptual analysis. He believes that actually there is no such thing. That people think that there is such a thing as conceptual analysis, but in fact there is no such thing. So he questions several of his works. He questions the plausibility of this picture. Okay. Yeah, I like this quotation that the idea that philosophy is conceptual analysis, confused and obscure ideas of conceptual truth create the illusion of a special domain for philosophical investigation. So he believes that there is no such thing. His criticism in very simple way, the most simple way, is the following, that say it is justified true belief analysis of knowledge. That is analysis of knowledge. It is not analysis of the concept of knowledge. So the analysis of X is not analysis of the concept of X. It is just analysis of X. Say justice in philosophy of politics, or we are analyzing the concept of justice. No, we are not analyzing the concept. We are just analyzing justice. We want to find out what justice is. In epistemology, we are not analyzing the concept of knowledge. We are just analyzing knowledge. We want to find out what is knowledge. This is very simple objection, and well, personally, I and Vito also, we are giving a lot of weight to this objection, but nevertheless, at least for the sake of argument, we will assume that there is such a thing as conceptual analysis. Also very well-known David and Sterelny, Language and Reality. So what are philosophers who claim to be doing conceptual analysis? What are they really doing? Well, they are constructing empirical theories about the nature of kinds on the basis of empirical judgments about instances and non-instances of the kind. So what philosopher probe from their armchairs is not their tacit a priori knowledge about meanings or concepts, but their tacit empirical knowledge about kinds. Knowledge acquired through a lifetime of acquaintance with the kinds. We do not deny a role for thought experiments. We simply deny that this role is a priori. Well, Nenad Mišević, he had the same view that these, well, conceptual truths or analytic judgments are actually very general, well, empirical generalizations at a very, very high and abstract level, something like John Stuart Mill. Okay, so what do we mean by conceptual analysis? Well, on the one hand, we rely on, there's no technical precondition for our analysis. We just rely on intuitive understanding that, say, uncle is mother's brother, that is matter of conceptual analysis, and that uncle played water polo, that is matter of factual analysis. Okay, the question is, what do we assume? Actually, we are assuming maybe a Kantian picture. Maybe this is a Kantian picture. Do you see this Word document? S is P.
Not yet, just the PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry.
You probably need to share again.
Yeah, I have to do it again. Oh, and participants can now see your application. Okay.
Mhm.
So Kant has this relatively well-known distinction between explicative or explicative and ampliative judgments. So judgments, well, at least typically or quite often have the form S is P, subject is predicate. And if P is contained, if predicate is contained in subject, the judgment is explicative. And if P is not contained in S, the judgment is ampliative. So it is widening or broadening. So conceptual truth about S is explicative. And now we are drawing a distinction here between conceptual truths and theories. So conceptual truth about S is explicative and theory about S is ampliative. So that the theory about S goes beyond the conceptual truth about S. So we will, so somehow, I don't know whether that is very good technological decision, but we have a contrast between conceptual truths and theories. Now let me be daring. For instance, in the case of knowledge, conceptual truth about knowledge would be that a lucky guess cannot be knowledge. In our opinion, it seems that this is contained in the concept of knowledge. On the other hand, say causal theory of knowledge, the idea that is believed that P is knowledge, if and only if it is caused by the fact that P in the appropriate way. Causal theory of knowledge is ampliative judgment. It is a theory about knowledge that goes beyond the concept that is, say, causal theory of knowledge is not something that is contained in the concept of knowledge. After all, we are talking about innate knowledge. That's some ideas are innate. Maybe there is no such thing as innate knowledge. Maybe we are all really tabula rasa, but at least we have a concept of innate knowledge, and we don't think that it is a contradiction. So, causal theory of knowledge is not contained in the concept, it's theory about knowledge. Or maybe case of Descartes. He believed that conceptual truth about extension is that if something has extension, only if it can have parts. So that having parts is contained in the concept of extension. On the other hand, his theory about thinking, that material substance cannot think. In our opinion, that this is ampliative judgment, that is a theory, his theory about thinking.
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. So going back to knowledge for a second.
Okay.
So there's you make the explicative judgment for the conceptual truth, and then you say that, okay, for example, the causal theory of knowledge is an example of ampliative judgment. Mm-hmm. But couldn't we also take the causal theory of knowledge just to be explicative of what epistemic justification is?
Sorry.
So suppose we have the concept. So suppose we have the concept of knowledge, right, okay, as say justified true belief. Okay. And then, okay, well, what does justified here mean? I mean, the causal theory of knowledge is an answer to that question. Right. So it's just the causal theory of knowledge could just be a conceptual analysis of justification. So in some ways, I
think you are
how we frame whether something is a explicative judgment or an ampliative judgment depends on the framing.
Yeah, I think you are right. This is right in the sense that this is a good comment, good objection. I would prefer somehow to cut the link between concept and conceptual analysis and causal theory of knowledge. But you are right.
I mean, I'm not sure that there's an objection. It's just that I'm not sure. It's just a claim that whether we conceive of a particular some content as ampliative or explicative seems like it depends on the framing to some extent.
On the framing,
right? So framed as a theory, framed as a comment about knowledge, perhaps the causal theory is ampliative. Framed as a statement about justification, it may be explicative.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it depends on the frame. I think that your objection actually is that it just is that causal theory of knowledge just is extension of our conceptual analysis.
I think that's one way to take it. Yeah.
Yeah, that it depends on the frame. The technique on the frame would be less dangerous, maybe, but yeah. Or in the case, say, of John Rawls, that what is just is what we would agree upon behind the veil of ignorance. Okay, prima facie, this looks like a theory. It seems that veil of ignorance is not contained in the concept of justice. However, if you go deeper, you may say that impartiality is conceptually contained in justice, that an act cannot be just if it is not impartial. And further, how to explicate further the idea of impartiality? Well, it's the veil of ignorance. So one might argue that actually Rawls's theory is ultimately a matter of conceptual analysis, although prima facie does not look like that. These are objections to, well, to our paper or our claims, our assumptions. Yeah. I don't have any precise and strong and convincing arguments. We're just relying here on, let's say, prima facie impression that say that causal theory of knowledge is not contained in the concept of knowledge, that decision-making behind the veil of ignorance is not contained in the concept of justice. Maybe more detailed analysis will show that we are wrong, and as you rightly pointed out, that yeah, that's a good objection, and it certainly has its weight.
Yeah, just with the Rawls analogy, I mean, I would say that I don't think Rawls thinks that the veil of ignorance original position mechanism is conceptual, is an explication of the concept of justice. I think that's just a heuristic for fairness.
Yeah,
and fairness is the part of the explication of the concept of justice. Yes, that's just a minor point about that particular example.
I think that he has to take into account impartiality, and that by veil of ignorance he's achieving, that is, well, heuristics or means or device for achieving impartiality. Maybe we can cut this conceptual analysis line at that place.
I mean, and also just another thing I think, because I think Rawls would reject that what he's doing is conceptual analysis. I mean, in part, what he explicitly says is, like, I'm offering you a conception of justice, which so explicitly denies that this is the concept, right? This is a specification of the concept or a particular conception of it. So it doesn't fall directly by definition out of the meaning of justice.
Yeah.
We have to do all this other kind of work on his view.
Yeah.
Whether he's right about his own view, I don't know. But I think that's what he's saying.
Spirit, I didn't check up, well, recently, whether he has any metaphilosophical comments, but that is his spirit. I'm not analyzing the concept or telling you what is the meaning of justice, fairness, and so on. I'm just telling you, I'm giving you a model or theory. I'm telling you what justice is. That would be in his spirit, although one might argue. Yeah. Well, in the history of philosophy, we have cases like Descartes. Well, in my opinion, his theories are theories. Well, his idea that matter cannot think, that that only there is res cogitans. Well, that's actually circular, I would say, and so on. But that his mind-body dualism is not a matter of conceptual analysis; it is matter of theory. No, okay, so Kant has these explicative, ampliative judgments. Logical positivists, they were giving formulation that the judgment is analytic if and only if it is true on the ground of its meanings or of its meanings alone. Or Jackson has this: by conceptual analysis, we determine which objects fall under the concepts and which do not. Roughly speaking, these different definitions of conceptual truth should be equivalent. I don't know whether they are equivalent, I'm not sure, but roughly speaking, generally speaking, here people want to express the same thing. Okay, let me go back to slides.
Well, whether that's true would depend on what meaning alone means. What is so? I'm not taking issue with your characterization of the logical positivist view, but what do we think they mean by on the ground of its meaning alone? Because one thing could be like, oh well, as it turns out, where the concept is deployed might make a difference. Does that count as the meaning alone? The culture in which the concept's deployed? So the meaning just changes from concept to concept, or is that part of the meaning, or not part of the meaning? Because it seems like Jackson's view could capture that. Look, in this particular place, it falls under how the concept falls under the concept. I was just curious if by meaning alone, the logical positivists could take into account the fact that, oh, here this mean we use this term for this, and it has a slightly different usage in this other place.
Other place, wow. I think that.
I mean, just like so that all the empirical work that's been done, over the last 2 decades about, when people use this concept in China, they use it this way, and when they use it in the United States, they use it, this, that's what the intuitions. You do think that kind of experimental philosophy results.
Yeah. That in South Korea they have lower standards of knowledge or higher standards or something. Well, positivists were not discussing such examples, but this kind of relativism, linguistic relativism, one thing that they might say is that in that case, Koreans and we hear that we do not have the same concept of knowledge. That would be one answer. But they actually tacitly assumed, maybe even ideal language, maybe not ideal, but idealized natural language. And here, meaning alone means that there are no empirical results, no matters of fact. There's this idea of this principle of verification, that the statement is meaningful if it is either analytic or empirically verifiable. So either analytic, that is meaning alone, or empirically verifiable. Or these Hume's fork, these relationships of ideas and matters of fact. So that meaning alone would stand in Humean terms for relations among ideas. That would be, I don't know, personally I would not give a lot of weight on this argument from, let's say, linguistic relativism, we can always, I hope, eliminate this and say that with the West and people in the East, that we have slightly different concepts, so that when we are translating texts, we have to be careful about it. Actually, I asked Neven Sesardic, he was my teacher, my professor, and he was fed up of Croatia. He went to Hong Kong, and he was teaching there, and he had a lot of hours of just basic logic. And then when he came back, then I asked him, is it true that people in China, that they have different mind and that they are thinking in a different way because they have different languages? He said, what? Bullshit. They are doing exactly the same errors that we are doing here. So that was his answer. But okay, I mean, that what you say, it is a reasonable and legitimate objection, though I would not give too much weight to it. Okay, let's go to the PowerPoint again. Vito, am I consuming too much time?
Slightly. We have hour and a half, so we are in the middle right now.
But we have to proceed to the main claim. Okay. Okay, we're just clarifying some concepts. Yeah, actually, we have a contrast between conceptual truths and theories. There is one interesting objection to this contrast. It was raised by Andrej Jandrić. Said, well, take a look at Euclid's elements. Whole theory, whole his geometry is a matter of conceptual analysis. He's analyzing the concept of point, straight line, pure, blah, blah, and he has the complete theory. So our answer would be that, okay, that can be the case in mathematics, because the whole mathematics is kind of a priori. And the question is, what is philosophy? Now, okay, so we should not conflate conceptual analysis and a priori analysis or armchair reasoning. We are taking the idea of conceptual analysis in the narrow sense to see whether a predicate is contained in the subject. Okay. Okay, Vito, are you taking over now?
Yes, I'm gonna share, but I send a request, so
yeah.
now I can share it. Yes, fine. Okay, do you see it?
Yeah. Well, I have still the same thing on my screen.
Okay, so I'm gonna continue now, and basically everything that Boran was explaining now, we'll try to show that on one specific example, and the example that we are going to take is one prominent debate in philosophy of science, which is the debate on scientific explanation.
Sorry. Are you sharing the presentation?
Yes. Can you see it?
Oh.
Wait, I'm gonna just a second.
Can see you, Justin, and Philip in the darkness. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are focusing on one specific debate in the philosophy of science, which is scientific explanation. And basically what we ask and what we want to basically write about in our paper is whether this debate, the debate on scientific explanation, is an instance of conceptual analysis, or is it rather something else? And what we think it is actually, it's that it is an instance of model building, theory building, and so on. While we'll claim now during this case study that we look into that there are actually some conceptual truths, but in the end, what's happening is that we are doing, or rather authors in the debate on scientific explanations are building theories, models, and so on. And also towards the end of the presentation, Boran will again talk about some perhaps examples that go beyond scientific explanation in some other areas of philosophy of science. Okay, so there are few accounts of scientific explanation that are very prominent in the debate, and maybe some of you are familiar with them. The one that basically started the whole topic of scientific explanation is Karl Hampel and his deductive nomological account. Basically, what he claims is that scientific explanation is a deductive nomological argument, which means that to explain something, we need at least two premises, one that has a certain law of nature and the other that has some specific conditions. So if we want to explain why the Earth rotates the sun, we need some law of nature, like Newton's law of gravity, for instance, and some specific conditions such as the Earth has such and such mass, it is in such relation towards the sun, and so on. And so from that, we can derive the explanation. Then, since that account had some counter arguments that we'll also look into a bit later, there were developed other accounts, usually of causal nature, let's say. And there is David Lewis' famous account that states causes that explain a certain phenomenon. So, for instance, if we want to explain why a certain car crash happened, we need to find some causes to it. For instance, that the tire was bald or that the driver was under the influence of alcohol and so on. Also, Wesley Salmon had similar idea that scientific explanation is basically an analysis of relations in causal nexus. So again, causes are very important for certain explanation. Also, Michael Friedman, he had his conception of scientific explanation, which is that basically explanations are unifications. So what we want to do, we want to unify a great deal of certain phenomena. So what, for instance, Darwin's evolution theory did, it unified a lot of phenomena, natural phenomena that happened, such as natural selection or mutations later on and so on. And also new mechanists nowadays are very prominent in philosophy of biology. So they believe that basically what's happening in biology is that explanations have this structure of mechanisms. So that a certain phenomenon, such as, for instance, protein synthesis. Proteins are important for us, for instance, for as building blocks, or for instance, our blue eyes or wrinkled hair. And so they have certain mechanisms with certain parts and so on, like DNA molecule, RNA molecule interacting, and in the end producing a certain protein. So all of these are accounts of scientific explanations. And so what Boran and I was asking ourselves, and in the email correspondence that Boran talked in the beginning, is whether these accounts are instances of conceptual analysis, and whether these authors, Hampel, Friedman, and so on, Salmon, were doing conceptual analysis. And we think they weren't doing that. They are building models, theories, and so on. And let's now see maybe why is that the case. So Boran talked a lot about this division between conceptual truths about X and theories about X. Conceptual truths are contained in the concept of X or derived from it, while theories are not contained. And that's something that's happening here. What these authors are doing, for instance, especially Hampel, in his work, is that they are basically abstracting from, let's say, scientific practice in a way. And at the first glance, it may seem like they are doing maybe conceptual analysis, but because they are abstracting from practices, but actually they are building theories. But also what we want to claim here is that there are some conceptual truths about the let's say, concept of explanation in itself, right? So explanation, we believe, is always an answer to the why question. Also, every explanation must have explanandum and explanans. Explanandum is something that we want to explain, and the explanans part is the part that is doing the explanation. So in the case with Hempel and the deductive-nomological account, explanandum would be the case of that we want to explain why the Earth rotates the Sun, while the explanans is the part with the premises, with law of nature, with specific conditions, and so on. Another parts that could be conceptual truths in explanation, we believe, is that explanation has to be irreflexive, so it cannot explain itself, and that's something that is contained in the concept of explanation. Also, that explanations have to be asymmetrical. If A explains B, then B cannot explain A. And we will explicitly this show a bit later with one prominent counterargument to Hempel's account. And also, we believe that explanation also is basically transitive. If A explains B and B explains C, then A explains C. Although for this last point, we are not quite sure yet. We took this from this discussion about metaphysical grounding and scientific explanation as well. And here is a list of possible other conceptual truths that we don't want to look into it right now. But here, as you can see, are irreflexivity, asymmetry, transitivity, something that we pointed out earlier. Okay, so since now we showed that explanation does have some certain conceptual truths, what is happening with all of these accounts? So what is happening with Hempel's, for instance, account, the first one that started the debate, is that he's framing his account around this idea that explanation is, it takes a form of an argument, as we said, deductive argument. But it seems that it's not something that is contained in the concept of explanation, because later on, as we had more and more accounts developing, we could see that explanation, these accounts contain something else in them, like causes, or even there are some non-causal explanations like mathematical explanations and so on. So what Hempel is doing, he's adding another layer, which is this theoretical layer or modeling, building a model. That's what we want to show with Hempel's account. Also, what Hempel is doing is that he believes the scientific explanation has to rely on laws and some certain regularities, but it seems that it doesn't have to be like that. Regularity is not necessarily a part of explanation. We have some perfect explanations that do not require regularity, such as, for instance, with the car crash example. Or with some production examples in, for instance, biology or sciences. So a conclusion about this part is that we shouldn't always link these conceptual truths with the accounts that these authors in scientific explanation debate were doing. Maybe what's confusing is that we always kind of link conceptual analysis and a priori thinking, well, what's happening here is that maybe, okay, Hempel and what Boran also said with other examples, these authors are kind of in armchair, engaging in a way of armchair thinking, but in the end, they are doing a posteriori work, right? They are looking into practice.
Sorry, just
Yes.
maybe to explain to Justin, why are we insisting on the point? You already said that conceptual analysis should not be conflated with a priori activity, because we find out that many people, I mean philosophers, colleagues, they just conflate conceptual analysis with a priori, with armchair reason.
Right. So your view, your view is that, I mean, conceptual analysis is a priori, but not all a priori reasoning or work is thereby conceptual analysis, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Analysis is a priori, but not all a priori is conceptual analysis.
Yeah.
Just people, colleagues, professional philosophers, they just conflated it. Oh, that's the same. Yeah. No, it's not. if we go more into detail, we see that it is not.
And you want to leave a room, I take it, for a priori work that isn't just bad a posteriori work. Right? I mean, I don't know what you want to put in that, in that category. That's okay. It's a priori, but not conceptual analysis, but also not just our guess as to what's really going on.
I don't know whether we have this at one of these slides. For instance, the idea that in the deductive argument, you have to get the particular conclusion. So, not general, but particular. In order to get particular conclusion, you must have at least one particular premise. This is a priori. This is an a priori insight. However, it is not a matter of conceptual analysis. That would be the example. Yeah. Sorry, Vito.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, it's actually on this slide. Yeah. It's just that I didn't mention it. Yeah. Okay, here are just some examples of what Hempel and Oppenheim at the beginning were doing. They were basically abstracting from scientific practice. So they were engaging in some kind of armchair thinking, but in the end, they are doing with a posteriori facts, right? With facts from practice. So they were abstracting from some general characteristics of scientific explanation and then coming up with this theory or the deductive nomological model. Also here, we just wanted to show with this slide that what they were doing here is that they had some conceptual truths that we were talking about, like R3 and R4, but also in their model, there are some that are as some conditions as R1 and R2 that are not conceptual truths about the explanation. So on this slide, we wanted to show that there are both conceptual truths, but also that this theory building that we were talking about. Also, with other accounts, something similar is happening. So here we have Michael Friedman's where he thinks that the concept of unification is scientific explanation, basically. But again, we think that is not contained in the concept of explanation. He's adding another layer to it, right? What he thinks is that explanations provide understanding, that what science is doing, it helps us understanding the world by reducing the total number of independent phenomena that we have to accept as ultimate or given. Also, that the scientific understanding arises when we derive many phenomena from a small set of general principles, and basically that the explanation is unification of brute facts. So what he wants to insist is that unification is the main driver of scientific explanation. His main example is Newton's laws, which explain planetary motion not just by predicting it, but by unifying diverse motions under a single framework, like Kepler's or Galileo's, and so on. So Newton unified these laws of motions. That's why Newton's laws are so powerful. They are unifying. So a world with fewer independent phenomena is more comprehensive than one with more. Henceforth, the unification is very important for explanation, right? Also, Salmon's claim is actually Salmon's claim goes a bit different than Friedman's with unification. Salmon thinks that what explains are causes. So good explanation describes a causal path that led to the phenomenon in question. Some explanations are, for instance, this baseball bat example, where we can think about the process where you hit a certain ball with a baseball bat, and then that ball hits the window and it smashes it. It breaks the window, right? So that is, we have certain causes that lead to certain effect, right? And that's the explanation. Causes are explanations of that phenomenon. But again, there are explanations that are also non-causal, such as mathematical. So it seems that What Salomon is doing again is adding something more than just taking into account conceptual truths. So to conclude this part is that basically all of these accounts that we look into are not conceptual truths about the scientific explanation. Rather, it's their instances of theories, theory building, model building, and so on. But we also don't want to say that there are no conceptual truths, that conceptual analysis is not present, especially in scientific explanation, but also in other areas of philosophy. We want to put more weight on theory building, model building part of philosophy, and the engagement of authors in philosophy in that aspect, rather than in conceptual analysis. But it's not that there's no conceptual analysis. And with this part of the presentation, we want to point out some of these conceptual truths about explanation. First one here is asymmetry. So a famous counterexample to Hempel's deductive nomological model was this flagpole example from Sylvan Bromberger, 1966. So from the length of the flagpole and the angle of the light, we can deduce the length of the shadow, and that's perfectly fine explanation. However, from the length of the shadow and the angle of the light, we can deduce the length of the flagpole. But we wouldn't say that the shadow explains the height of the flagpole, right? So something is off here. So deduction goes both ways, but explanation does not. So the length of the flagpole explains the length of the shadow, but not in the opposite way. So explanation is not deduction. So we cannot say that deductive nomological account or this deductive argument is a conceptual truth about explanation. Rather, it's something that Hempel adds in his theory. Yeah. Here again, it seems that asymmetry is contained in the concept of explanation. We have to have this asymmetry. That's why we insisted that it is a conceptual truth about explanation. But as we've seen, for instance, in Hempel's account, that's not the case. Also here, we listed few recent mechanical accounts in philosophy of biology, by which philosophers of biology think that structures such as mechanisms, pathways, or cascades are doing the explanation in biology or life sciences in general. And here with this table, we wanted to also show with this gray part that these we think are conceptual truths about these structures. And in the next slides, we will show in more details why we think so. But when we take into account this new mechanistic movement or these mechanistic-like explanations and so on, authors that are dealing with this, they are again adding some extra bits that are not conceptual truths about explanations. For instance, these investigative strategies or explanatory strategies, how we can methodologically maybe grasp these structures in the nature, in the world, or how we represent them, and so on. So conceptual truths about mechanisms, for instance. So mechanisms are these structures that consist of certain parts and interactions organized in a specific way to produce a phenomenon. And before I already said about this example of protein synthesis. And one very easy example, let's say, is the example of an engine in a car. So if we want to explain why the car moves, we then want to look under the hood, let's say, of the car and see the engine, see the mechanism that is influencing the movement of the car, which has its own parts. The parts are arranged in a specific way, organized in a specific way. They are interacting and in the end producing the movement of the car. And it seems that the conceptual truth about mechanisms is that they comprise of organized parts interacting with each other. Otherwise, it is not a mechanism. So it seems that organization and constitution are parts of the very concept of a mechanism. With the case of cascades, cascades are also one structures in philosophy of biology, and they involve amplifying steps, converting a small cause or trigger into a huge effect. And here examples are also one, let's say, easier everyday example is the snowball effect, where from one snowflake, basically, we can have this avalanche, the buildup of snow, and also one from biology, medicine, basically, is that the blood coagulation example, when we cut ourselves, our body reacts by sending a signal to our blood cells so that they rush towards the spot and build up of blood cells arrive, and the blood clot is formed to prevent the bleeding. So what is the conceptual truth here about the cascades is that they have to amplify. Otherwise, obviously, they are not cascades. So in the case of blood coagulation, we need to have these blood cells, amplified number of blood cells, similar to the snowball effect. So it seems that amplification is something that is very important necessary, basically, for the concept of cascade. And with pathways, the last...
sorry,
yeah.
maybe it's interesting to notice here, this place, Timothy Williamson, what was his comment? Well, that you have a counterfactual conditional that cascade would not be a cascade unless it amplifies. So it's just a counterfactual conditional like any other. There's no difference between conceptual and empirical or factual or something. That was his comment on this place.
Yeah. And the last one is pathways. So they're also a form of mechanistic explanation involving a sequence of steps. And here we have, for instance, a certain river or glycolysis. Glycolysis is one example in also biochemistry, biology, where from one molecule of glucose we get through certain steps and phases we get energy, molecules of energy in form of ATPs. And also in this case, it seems that a conceptual truth about pathways is that they have to have more than two elements. They have to have these steps. Otherwise, they are not pathways. And kind of to sum up this scientific explanation debate and this meta-analysis that we did here is that we want to picture this debate in the following way. So we have these several accounts that we talked about, such as Hempel's, Friedman's, Salmon's new mechanistic account. And in the heart of them lies these conceptual truths that we talked about, such as irreflexivity, asymmetry, why question, explanandum, explanans part. That's something that explanation contains, the concept of explanation contains. However, all of these accounts build something up, are doing more work. They are building theories, building models, and that's something that we wanted to illustrate here. And now Boran will move even beyond and try to show that there are even more prominent debates that in which authors are doing something similar, building theories, building models, and philosophy is more about that. You want to share, or I can just move?
Continue.
Okay.
Well, for instance, the probability, accounts of probability. There are several theories of probability. That probability is relative frequency, or that is a propensity out there in the physical world, or that probability is just a degree of belief, and so on. So there are different theories of probability or different accounts of probability. And we also here we are inclined to say that this is not a conceptual analysis. These, say, three theories, they are not matter of conceptual analysis. They are not analyzing the concept of probability, but they are rather just giving a theory of probability or model of probability. For instance, relative frequency, say 70 out of 100. One might argue that this is rather the evidence that probability is 70%. It's not its meaning. Maybe on the other hand, that probability has to be between 1 and 0. One might argue that this is in the concept of probability. Maybe these axioms of multiplication of probability, that if you multiply, I don't know, 0.8 with 0.2 and you are getting 0.4, one might argue that this is a matter of a priori. For instance, who is Zvonimir Šikić? Who is he? He is in Croatia, author. He's mathematician and philosopher. and he's currently working on a book on probability. And I asked him, well, these theories of probability, is it a matter of conceptual analysis? And he said, I don't know. He knows what conceptual analysis is. He knows philosophy quite well, and he knows mathematics. And his answer was, I don't know. I understand the question, but I just don't know. Okay, let's go on. Yeah, for instance, or the progress in science, we think that it is obvious that different accounts of the progress in science are not matter of conceptual analysis. We can analyze the concept of progress or the concept of science and so on, but we will not get this picture. For instance, the question whether progress is cumulative or successive, like Kuhn believed, or that actually there is no, it is, well, or Laudan's view that progress is rather something like kind of illusion or something. They are all different theories about the progress of science. They are not conceptual analysis. Okay, go on. Yeah, they are actually reconstructions of the actual history of science, not of its concept. And for these reasons, we would say that there are other models or theories of the scientific progress. Okay. Yeah, or accounts in the epistemology. These justify true belief. This really looks like a conceptual analysis. However, discussion between foundationalism and coherentism, it seems that this is not a matter of conceptual analysis. Foundationalism and coherentism are theories about knowledge. There are different theories about knowledge. Maybe this debate between internalism and externalism, maybe that is closer to the pure conceptual analysis. For instance, the question whether in order to know that P, that A has to know that he knows that P, one might try to argue that this is a matter of conceptual analysis. Analysis of the concept of knowledge. Is it so that in order to know, we have to know that we know? Sorry, I have a mosquito here. Okay, let's go on.
I cannot move. Just a second. Something happened. Strange.
Well, internal blocked the whole thing, but that's more or less.
Oh, here we are.
Yeah. And we believe that the same holds for the rest of philosophy, so that philosophy's primary concern is not analysis of concepts, but building models and theories about human mind, meaning, just society, and so on.
Adaptation.
Sorry. Yeah. So
that's it. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, questions, comments. Here we are. Shoot.
Sure. So when I think about what it feels like to do conceptual analysis for my, like, does this seem right? So there's some concept knowledge. We go through, oh, does it have, does mere opinion count? No, it has to be justified. That kind of thing. It just sort of, there's a way in which I kind of introspect to how a particular analysis feels and like, oh yeah, that seems right. And I'm just curious if you take introspection to be empirical or a priori. Sorry, a posteriori or a priori. What is interest? Where do you think introspection falls on that? Because it seems like introspection is a part of conceptual analysis.
Well, introspection about the concept, so it should be a priori. However, there is one thing that pops out all the time. For instance, simple mathematics, that 5 and 7 makes 12. well, but kids are learning how that's supposed to be a priori. Yeah, but kids in kindergartens, they're using their pencils, flomasters, or carrots, or whatever, salty sticks, and that's how they learn. The standard answer is, yeah, using pencils is just the pedagogical device for triggering the a priori intuition that 5 and 7 makes 12. And once you get the point, you don't need fingers or pencils and so on. Similar answer is to this question when we are introspecting or reflecting whether lucky guess can be a knowledge, but no, there must be some systematicity, some justification, so on. That seems right. We learn a lot from empirical world, and we learn a lot. But when we start working with these elements, whether lucky guess can or cannot be knowledge, then we are on a priori ground. Also, the word knowledge, the idea of knowledge, and so on, we learn from experience. But nevertheless, when we are doing conceptual analysis, we are doing something a priori. That would be the answer.
Well, so if someone asks me, Justin, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm feeling anxious. Let's say I say that, right? That seems like a kind of empirical introspection,
Yeah.
right? So some forms of introspection are empirical, and you want to say some forms of introspection are not empirical.
Yeah.
And so it would seem to me that if you want to defend the idea, well, I mean, and actually, I don't even, this is probably not very integral to this particular project, but it seems like you want to say, hey, look, there is this a priori element to philosophy. Conceptual analysis was one form of that. There's a way of distinguishing between the kinds of introspection that seems like a regular part of conceptual analysis, or checking in with how our analysis of a concept seems to us, and the other kinds of introspection where it's quite clearly an empirical matter, it seems to me.
I'm not sure that I get the point.
Okay, well, so I mean, maybe you disagree. So I suppose you say, Justin, how are you feeling? And I say, I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Right? Is that an empirical? Am I reporting on the basis, like, I sort of check in with my feelings. I realize I'm feeling anxious. That is kind of introspection, and it's a posteriori.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. You asked me, Justin, do you think that opinion could be knowledge, mere opinion could be knowledge with that justification? And I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me at all. Why? Well, because I think about these kinds of cases, and that doesn't seem like knowledge. And over here, that doesn't seem like knowledge either. So I introspect about how I feel about these cases, and you want to say, oh, that's not a posteriori. That's conceptual. That's conceptual analysis. Conceptual analysis is a priori.
Yes.
And so it seems like what we need is some way of distinguishing between the kinds of introspection that are empirical in nature, and the kinds of introspection that are not. Maybe it's easy to do, but it just strikes me as the task needed here if you want to maintain the conceptual analysis as a priori.
Yeah, relying, I don't know, maybe that's ultimately circular, but we are relying on some intuitive distinction between uncle is mother's brother and uncle plays water polo. And there is intuitive distinction between the two. That first is about the meaning of term uncle, and that the second is about, well, factual effect about uncle, what is he doing. So we are relying on that intuitive distinction. Is that good enough? I don't.
Well, that seems to be
Well, there is.
That seems to be a different distinction, though. Sorry, I just got a message from my earbuds. They're about the battery's is low, but the distinction between my uncle is my mother's brother and my uncle plays water polo, right? I don't need to introspect for my uncle plays water polo, right? That's not introspect. I'm just looking out in the world. That's very clearly empirical.
Yeah.
I was talking about cases in which introspection, the empirical aspect seems to be introspective. So you just want to say, look, it seems to me that you're committed to the idea that some forms of introspection are a priori, some forms of introspection are empirical. Is that not right?
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
In a sense,
so that's weird, a little weird. Or at least I don't know if it's weird, but at least it seems like in need of some way of drawing the distinction in a non-ad hoc way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in non-circular. Well, it seems that we are just using word introspection in two different meanings here.
That's one possible response. Okay.
Okay. It means that what is going on inside. So whether I'm anxious or have a toothache or something, it's different from introspection when I'm thinking whether lucky guess can be knowledge. Seems to be a different kind of introspection.
Yeah, I think
I agree. It's different. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think
I don't have an elaborate theory about it, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we wanted to grasp the aspect of, I mean, when we think about introspection in the sense of Hempel or scientific explanation, what they were introspecting that something that they acquired from scientific practice, and that's what we wanted to grasp, not the part where we are introspecting our feelings or something like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know what.
But typically forms of knowledge don't vary on the basis of their subject, but on their means, right? So normally we distinguish between a priori and a posteriori knowledge, not on the basis of what it is we're knowing about, but on how we acquire the knowledge. Here you want to say, oh, there's this means by which we acquire knowledge, introspection, and it turns out whether it's a priori or a posteriori depends on the thing we're directing this means of knowledge towards.
Actually,
that might be plausible, but it seems like it, and I don't know the literature. Maybe it's already done. For all I know, someone's already done this.
Well, the standard definition is that knowledge is a priori if in its justification we do not appeal to empirical facts. And it is a posteriori if in its justification we do appeal to empirical facts. And this is a standard distinction. I don't know whether that would be enough. Maybe. So it's not actually the causal process. How do we get the idea of something? But it is the justification. When we are justifying our claim, do we appeal or we do not appeal to empirical facts? But here we are assuming that by introspection, whether we are anxious, that is empirical fact. And in the justification of your judgment, you are appealing to the empirical fact. While that 5 and 7 makes 12, in the justification of your judgment, you do not appeal to empirical facts. That will be the answer. I don't know whether it's good enough or non-circular or.
I guess that, so when I do a successful conceptual analysis and it's like, oh, that seems right to me, I guess, what am I identifying there? Is it something about like what am I recognizing when I recognize that's the right answer? Or what is it that's cluing me into that? Am I observing the truth or am I observing my reaction?
The truth.
Okay. I mean, I think that's what you have to say.
Of course.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not the only one with questions, I think, Philip.
Philip, do you have any?
Well, if philosophy is theory or model building, as you say, so why do you need a conceptual analysis? I mean,
well,
why don't you just say, well, we are not analyzing the concept of X, but XL? Right?
well, because it's here. Because it's
Well,
there is no special answer. It's just here.
I mean, you don't have to say, well, I don't know, amplification is contained in the concept of the cascade, but just where there is a cascade, there is also an amplification. You don't need these concepts, though.
Yeah, that is this objection from the beginning of the talk, and we take it seriously. Yeah, that amplification is contained in cascade, not in the concept of cascade. Yeah, that is very strong objection, we think, but as we said, at least for the sake of arguments, we are going on. That is a strong argument, I think. That's just talk about concepts is just redundant.
It complicates things, right?
Yeah, it's just redundant. Oh, we are not analyzing knowledge, we are analyzing the concept of knowledge. We are not analyzing justice, we are analyzing the concept of justice. And so on. Who needs that? Yeah, that's strong objection. Well, intuitively, there are some reasons for talking about concepts and conceptual analysis that we are analyzing, concepts and so on. Of course, the answer largely depends on what concepts are, what do we mean by concepts.
Yeah.
We didn't go into any theory about concepts. There are in recent years people like David Papineau and some other people, they would like to be externalists about concepts and proponents of conceptual analysis. In that case, conceptual analysis would automatically be analysis of the relationships in the world. I don't know whether they can have a pie and eat it, whether they can have both things, that to preserve conceptual analysis, but to argue that by doing conceptual analysis, we are analyzing the world. We didn't go into any develop of any theory about conceptual and the nature of concepts and the nature of conceptual analysis. Here we just, as I said, we just took the intuitive initial intuition that there is a difference between conceptual analysis and factual analysis.
All right, so I like what I like about the idea is, okay, you're saying, look, philosophy isn't just conceptual analysis. Really, it's this building of models and theories, and often the building of models and theories involves conceptual analysis, but it's not reducible to conceptual analysis. And that, I mean, it seems right that it's not all conceptual analysis. But it also seems right to me that it's not all theory building and models either. So I just was wondering, get clear on what your thesis is, because you started off by saying, oh, philosophy isn't merely conceptual analysis, it's the building of models and theories. But it also seems like philosophy is sometimes just raising a question or identifying something that's in need of, here's something we don't know, and here's a well-formulated question about it. Like, that's a kind of philosophical achievement right there. It doesn't seem to be building a model or a theory. Does that count as philosophy in your view?
Can you sum up the?
Yeah, is creating questions or identifying a question and specifying a question without doing any kind of additional model building or theory building count as philosophy in your view?
Well, it certainly is creating questions, but the interesting thing, well, creating questions is also interesting by itself, but ultimately it must be about the answers. I think that
that doesn't seem like it's part of the conceptual analysis of philosophy, right? I mean, so I would take issue with the idea that there's one thing philosophy is, it's this, where the answer is anything really. but maybe that's my own problem. But it certainly seems to me that, okay, if we sometimes the philosophical achievement is just identifying the question. No, like what doesn't that?
Okay, but well, there is this the point of philosophy is in posing questions, not in giving answers. That's something is missing. Something is.
Well, it could be both, right? It could be both.
Sometimes people say that the meaning of life is in the search for its meaning, not in the finding. Well, if the meaning of life is in the search, you must have search is a success word.
That's fine. If you, like, I'm not going to push that it's only questions.
Yeah.
I just want to make room for if we identify a question, that counts as doing philosophy.
Yeah, I think that
you don't have to rule that out.
I think asking right questions or identifying questions, it is part of philosophy, but ultimately, I think what all of us in philosophy are doing, we are, I don't know, arguing for certain positions, trying to answer a certain problem. So I think most of the time what we are doing, we are trying maybe to answer these questions, although I think Boran and I wouldn't say that's quite like identifying certain questions, posing questions is not philosophy. It is, but maybe mostly what we are doing is this model building, theory building, I don't know, posing arguments, counter arguments to certain positions and so on, which we believe it's part of theory building, model building.
If we take...
But to give an answer is not to build a theory or a model. I mean, it's too strong to insist on theories and models and whatever. I mean, there are various kinds of answers, right? There are more complicated answers. There are more simple answers. Answers that we don't need theories for that. Why theories?
So, well, that's a matter of terminological choice. If you take a look at what are Hempel, Salmon, Friedman, and other, what are they doing in discussion about scientific explanation, they are offering models or theories. That will be the end result of research.
Of scientific research, but not philosophical.
This is philosophical. The discussion about models of scientific explanation is a philosophical discussion. I think there is another interesting question that we didn't address here. Are there conceptual elements in physics, in biology, in yellow press, in sociology, so on? My guess is yes, that they would have the same situation as we have here in philosophy, that there are some conceptual truths and the rest is matter of model or theory. Except in pure mathematics, that's different thing. Yeah.
We can't hear it.
I just read an article this morning about knot theory in mathematics, like the tying of knots, and there's a way of measuring. There's a had been a standard way of measuring the complexity of knots, and that some people came up with two people who study the mathematics of knots came up with some counterexamples to this long-held standard way of measuring the complexity of knots. And it's like a big finding. The knot theory world is like turned upside down as a result. The field is now wild. This seems like an achievement in knot theory, right?
Yeah.
But it's simply saying, hey, this theory is false. This way of measuring the complexity of knots, this account of the complexity of knots is false. So it seems to me like I think I would just encourage you to be more pluralistic in your conception of what counts as philosophy. It seems like a negative result in philosophy could be a kind of achievement too, just like it seems to have been in knot theory.
Of course.
Yeah, but that's not to build a theory or a model either.
Oh, it's about building a true model or theory. And somebody shows that your model is not true.
Right, but maybe I'm misunderstanding the claim here, right? Like, suppose I showed that this particular argument for free will doesn't work, and that's all I've done.
Okay.
Have I done philosophy on your view?
Yes.
Even though I haven't built a model or a theory?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I just want to make sure I understood the scope of your comments. You're not just...
I don't think we want to claim that that's not philosophy. It's just that maybe we are inclined more to think that most of the work that philosophers are doing is maybe model building, theory building. I mean that's maybe the aim, but
desirable end result or the regulative idea would be, ideally, we are looking for true models and theories. And on that way, finding counterexamples of something is, of course, part of that way.
So it seems to make sense to me to say, okay, instead of saying philosophy is building models and theories, you say that would be like the aim of philosophy, and then there's the activity of philosophy. And maybe distinguishing between those things would avoid the confusion that I seem to have had just now. Yeah.
This is the ultimate desired end result of the overall research.
yeah, in the end, we are engaging with these theories. So even if we counter argue against, we are still, I don't know, engaging with certain theory, like with the not theory or whatever. So again, we are, I don't know, engaging with theory models. That's why they are so important in philosophy, maybe.
Well, the same thing.
I think
to be in science, somebody proposes a theory and somebody has a critique that that's not a true theory. So in a sense, that is progress. At least we know what is not true.
Yeah, I agree. That's a form of progress. I think that's probably the most significant form of progress philosophy makes, is pointing out what we don't know, that we might have thought we knew. And that's actually, I think, an important epistemic achievement.
Yeah. We had a student a couple of days ago. Well, the science makes progress, philosophy does not. Oops. What's wrong with philosophy? And then the student said, who says that science is doing any progress at all?
Right. All they've given us are wrong answers throughout history.
Maybe. Okay. Any more questions? So, Justin, you are going to give a talk when? Soon?
Yeah, I believe it's the last week of October.
Yeah, something like
Does that work for people? That Thursday?
Yeah. Last week, October. Yeah.
And maybe you could send
last
out
Thursday, you mean? Yeah, right.
Yeah, the last Thursday of October.
Okay.
Maybe you could send out an email sooner than the same week. So
we will announce that we are announcing that. Our web page. Yes, our web page by email. We are announcing that in advance. Actually, twice. 1 week in advance and 1 day in advance. That's reasonable written. Okay, thank you all for
Thank you.
Sure, thanks. It's fun. Thanks.
and participating in this thing. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.